Hello, happy St. Patrick's Day. So, I'm here to read with or to you Nancy Drew's clue book, The Tortoise and the Scare. I'm going to start by reading the first 4 chapters, just to catch parents particularly up, in case you don't have the book out. And these are the first 4 chapters we've read. All my other videos, I'll just read the 2 chapters for the week. But before we get started, joke of the day. Today's joke, being St. Patrick's Day, is, what do you get when you cross a 4-leaf clover with poison ivy? The answer? A rash of good luck on St. Patrick's Day. So let's begin. Nancy Drew, clue book, The Tortoise and the Scare by Carolyn Keene. And this is going to be chapters 1 through 4 as a review. Chapter 1, Guess Who? Nancy Drew stood in front of her science class with an index card in her hand. Her best friends, George Fay and Bess Marvin, were sitting in the back row. She stared down at the card, wanting to give everyone a clue that was good, but not too good. She didn't want them to guess the answer right away. "I'm tiny," she said, "and I have spines and short legs." Miss Pack, their teacher, murmured. She glanced around the classroom. What could she be? Does anyone have any ideas? Jamal Jones' hand shot up in the air. He always got straight A's. And had guessed the last 2 correct answers. Nancy held her breath, wondering if he'd get it right. "Are you a porcupine?" he asked. "You're so close." Nancy gave another clue. She was sure he'd get it right this time. "I can roll up in a ball if I'm scared." "Oh, you're a hedgehog!" Jamal cried. "Very good," Mrs. Pack said, taking the card from Nancy. It had hedgehog written on it in black block letters. "This class is going to be so prepared for our field trip tomorrow. I'm sure all the guides at the River Heights Wildlife Center will be impressed." Nancy took her seat next to her friends. Bess's long blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She leaned over her book. The World's Most Exotic Animals was open to the page about servals. The spotted cat looked like a cheetah with bunny ears. "Their eyes are so cute," Bess said, pointing to the pictures. They're so much bigger than their heads. I hope we get to see one tomorrow." "I want to see a ball python," George said. "Those are terrifying," Bess whispered. George and Bess were cousins, but they couldn't have been more different. George had short brown hair and brown eyes, was athletic, and was not easily scared. Bess always feared the worst would happen, and Nancy had only ever seen her play sports in gym class. Together, the 3 of them made up the Clue Crew. They worked together solving mysteries around River Heights. They'd even recover a telescope that had been stolen from a local museum. Harry and Liam McCormick went to the front of the class. They were identical twins with orange hair and freckles, and they liked doing presentations together whenever Mrs. Pack would let them. They just moved to River Heights in September and were obsessed with Antonio Alfano, the biggest prankster in Nancy's grade. Sorry. The twins were constantly doing things to try to impress him. Just the week before, they climbed 30 feet up a tree, trying to get his attention. "We're red," Liam said, staring at his card. "I'm red." "And we have giant wings," Harry added. Nancy thought they might be parrots, maybe conures, but that seemed too obvious. They'd been studying so many exotic animals that she sometimes got them mixed up. Was it possible they were scarlet macaws? "I don't think we are red," Harry said quietly to his brother. "Aren't we blue?" Mrs. Pack leaned over their shoulder to get a better view of their cards. "I think you're red and blue, and maybe a few other colors." "We're very colorful," Liam agreed. George raised her hand. "You're a scarlet macaw." "That's right! She's right!" Liam said. He seemed excited that someone had guessed the correct answer, even though they were a bit confused about which bird the macaw was. Mrs. Pack moved on to the next lesson, pulling up a video of a three-toed sloth on the screen in front of the class. The furry creature was swimming. As the rest of the class watched it paddle through the water, Nancy leaned over to her friends. "Tomorrow's going to be a perfect day," she said. "There's supposed to be this cool courtyard at the Wildlife Center with a crazy playground and a hedge maze. And there's a gift shop where you can buy stuffed animals or those pens with floating parrots in them." "Someone said they actually put the python around your neck," George whispered. "You can hold him." "George!" Nancy and Bess practically screamed. Then they broke into laughter, thinking of George with a giant snake hanging over her shoulders. Sometimes the things that totally creeped them out were the same things that George loved. "I don't think we've been somewhere this fun since..." Bess trailed off, her eyes wide. "Maybe ever," George added. Nancy smiled, knowing it was true. The River Heights Wildlife Center was going to be their biggest adventure yet. Chapter 2, The Great Escape. "You must be Miss Pack, and I'm guessing these are your exceptional science students." A woman with curly black hair bounded down the front steps of the Wildlife Center. She was wearing khaki from head to toe, khaki shorts, a khaki shirt, and even khaki-colored socks. Her name tag read Belinda. "They are," Mrs. Pack said cheerfully. "We've been so excited to visit." "Well, come on in." The woman waved each of them inside one by one. "I'm Belinda, and I'm the founder of the River Heights Wildlife Center. I'll be taking care of you today. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the place, and you can meet the wonderful staff that makes magic happen around here." Nancy followed Bess and George inside the center, which was a single-story building with a beautiful courtyard garden in the middle of it. There were already 2 other school groups there. The huge playground was crowded with kids and a group of moms with strollers. Nancy could hear animal noises echoing down the corridor. To the side of the playground was the hedge maze that Nancy had read about online. 2 men in khaki uniforms were standing by the cafe and picnic tables. "Come, sit down," Belinda said, waving for the class to find spots at the picnic tables. "I want to tell you a little bit about what brought me here to River Heights Wildlife Center." Nancy and her friends sat on the bench on the bench closest to Belinda. She seemed like she was much younger than Nancy's parents. She had funny pins all over the front of her shirt. One said, "Toucan can play the game," and had a cartoon drawing of a toucan. Another said, "Totally," and had an annoyed-looking toad on it. I'm going to stop and show you the picture. Can you see it? There it is. Picture on the page. Forgot to do that before. There's Belinda and the kids. "I'm so happy you all could come visit today, because helping animals has become my life passion," Belinda said. "I started rescuing abandoned and injured animals when I was a teenager. I worked in a bird sanctuary after college. And then I came here to create the River Heights Wildlife Center." "Are all of your animals injured?" Lily Almond, a girl with long black pigtails, asked. She was the biggest animal lover in class. Nancy had been to her house once for a school project and met her 2 hamsters, 1 bunny, 3 dogs, and her 20-pound cat, Otis. It's a big cat. "Most of them were when they came in here," Belinda answered. "All of them need our help. Sometimes people buy animals, and they don't know what to do with them. Like our flying squirrel, Bean. Somebody bought him online and didn't know how much time and effort it took to take care of him. Or our wolf, Moonrise. People actually thought he was a dog, so they brought him home, and he was trouble. Big trouble. He tore apart 2 couches and ate a hole in their door." "We learn a lot about wolves," Jamal said excitedly. "Yes, Miss Pack told me all about the lessons you've been doing lately." Belinda looked genuinely interested. Do you know the difference between a wolf and a dog? Wolves have fur on their bellies and amber-colored eyes, Jamal said. And their ears stick straight up, Willie chimed in. That's right, Belinda said. We'll talk more about wolves and snakes and birds, but first I want to introduce you all to the wonderful staff here. Because we use so much of our donations to rescue and take care of our wildlife, many people who work here are volunteers. Bob has been volunteering the longest, for 5 years now. A man with frizzy white hair stepped forward. He looked like he could have been someone's grandpa. After I retired, I thought it might be a fun thing to do, and I was right. I work with all the wildlife here, but I really love the capuchin monkeys and the kinkajou, too. Kinkajou? Bess whispered to Nancy, her brows furrowed. Nancy remembered them from one of their textbooks, even though they didn't spend a lot of time talking about them. It's like a tiny raccoon, but it's honey-colored instead of gray, and it lives in trees. The other men stepped forward after Belinda was done talking about Bob. He had long blonde hair that came down to his shoulders. He wore rings on 3 of his fingers and had a goatee. And this is Ocean, Belinda said, introducing him. And yes, before you ask, that is his real name. She tells the truth, Ocean laughed. My parents were hippies. I grew up on a farm in California. I've always loved wildlife, especially reptiles. I have a California king snake named Stephen and a tortoise named Betty. They're 2 of my best friends. California king? George said to no one in particular. Very cool. You'll meet Lisa in the gift shop, and Miles is coming in later, Belinda said. Now, let's start our tour, shall we? There are so many wonderful creatures here, and so little time. I'll pause to show you the picture. What do you think that is? Who are those 2 gentlemen? Can you figure it out? You would be correct if you talked about Bob and Ocean. Let's continue. Do you have pets, Bess? Asked Belinda. I have 2 chinchillas at home, Belinda said as she led the group back into the building. I'd love to have more pets, but I take care of so many animals here it feels like I already do. Now, where should we start? She looked down the right hallway and then down to the left. Are you ready to meet Rainbow? The class cheered in response. Belinda led them to the huge enclosure with sand and shrubs in it, and fresh produce scattered everywhere. A short wood fence surrounded the perimeter. It looked like a cabbage exploded, Nancy whispered to Bess. What's in there? Okay, everybody. Let's find a space along the outside of the fence to look for Rainbow. She might be hard to spot at first, but look closely, Belinda directed. She waited, watching the class's faces. Everyone lined up along the fence and peered into the enclosure. I see her, Lily said. Then a few more kids agreed. Nancy narrowed her eyes and finally saw a large tortoise behind a shrub. She was all the way in the back of the habitat. Her shell was brown and dark green, so she blended in with the sand and leaves around her. Rainbow will always have a very special place in my heart, Belinda said, staring at the tortoise. She was my very first rescue here at the Wildlife Center. An older woman had her as a pet, but when she moved, she just left Rainbow in her yard with a rotting pile of vegetables. The new owners found her and, well, they called me. And here's a picture of Rainbow. The kids spotted her. Nancy stared down at the tortoise. She felt really sad for the animal. She had to admit it was awful that someone had just left Rainbow. They're all alone. What would have happened to her if no one found her? On the day I went and got her, Belinda said, there was the most spectacular rainbow in the sky. And that's how she got her name, Miss Pack said. She smiled, even though that part was a little obvious. It was clear Mrs. Pack loved each one of Belinda's stories. Desert tortoises can be between a ½ pound and 11 pounds, and our rainbow's right smack in the middle, Melinda said. She weighs just 6 pounds. But what she lacks in size, she makes up for in personality. Belinda talked about how the tortoise was the longest living animal in the world. Desert tortoise can live between 50 and 80 years, but other species can live up to 150 years. There was even one tortoise who lived to 250 years. His name was Adwada, and he spent most of his life in a zoo in India. Oh, I bet you could do a Google search and find out about him. Then Belinda described the tortoise shell and how it is really two connected parts. Everyone in Nancy's class loved that because then they got to tell her everything they learned about tortoises over the past few weeks. Lily and Bess were shouting out answers to different questions. Bess told the whole class how desert tortoises regulate their body temperature by staying in burrows and under rocks when it's really hot outside. What do you think we'll see next? George whispered. When they finally left Rainbow's enclosure and turned the corner down the great hall, another school group was in the theater watching a short film about servals, and Nancy could tell Bess was a little jealous. I heard they have an alligator here, George told him. No way. Bess suddenly looked a little scared. The next habitat they went to wasn't open like Rainbow's. Instead, it was an enclosure with wire mesh covering all sides. It had sand and some big rocks in the back. In the corner, there was a small cave that looked like it was made out of plastic. This is where Mo lives, Belinda said. Mo, where are you? Come out, come out. She pulled a treat from her pocket and stepped inside, closing the gate behind her. Within a few seconds, a tiny red fox came out from the rocks and snatched the treat from her hand. Then it ran away. Did you see him? He was adorable, Mrs. Pack laughed. Nancy had noticed how much of an animal lover Mrs. Pack was. She was always in such a good mood when she was teaching them their wildlife unit. She seemed to especially love monkeys and sloths. Belinda told them all about the tiny kit fox and how it lived in the desert. It hid from its predators in bushes and shrubs and ate rodents for food. When they were done, they went to the next habitat and saw 2 ferrets. Nancy thought they looked a little like rats. George seemed to really like them. They're kind of funny, George whispered. Now I have a special surprise for you, Belinda said, turning a corner to another habitat. It was open and had a giant tree in the middle, with branches that touched the ceiling. She disappeared into a back room and came out with a furry baby clinging to her arms. I want to meet Peanut. Is that a sloth? Bess asked. A baby sloth? Nancy hadn't seen Mrs. Pack so happy since their class had won first prize in the River Heights Science Olympics. Both their hands were covering her mouth. Come on in, Belinda said, waving the class inside. This is one of our interactive habitats. Who would like to hold Peanut first? Just be very gentle with her. She scares easily. Jamal's hand shot up in the air. Belinda laid the tiny sloth down across his chest, and he held on to Peanut with both hands. Oh, here's a picture of that. By the way, the whining you might hear, that's my doggy. He's upset I'm not getting his ball that went under the couch, but he's just going to have to wait. Let's continue. Nancy and her friends crowded around the furry sloth. Its eyes were half closed, like it might fall asleep at any moment. It had a long snout, and each of its paws had 3 long claws on them. Peanut was born here in our wildlife center, Belinda said. Her mom, Luna, came in when she was just about to give birth. We like to think of her as the baby of our quirky family, because we have so few of those around here. Most of our animals are much older. Doesn't algae grow on sloth's fur? Jamal asked, remembering the fact from one of Mrs. Pack's lessons. He never took his eyes off the tiny creatures in his arms. It does. What a great bit of knowledge, Belinda said. Most sloths are from Costa Rica, and algae can grow on their fur because of the humidity there. They hang upside down in trees, and because of that green algae, they look more like a bundle of leaves than an animal. It's a perfect camouflage. Nancy turned around to say something to Bess, and that's when she noticed the other wildlife volunteer standing in the hall. It was Bob, the older man, with white hair. He looked like he was trying to get Belinda's attention, but now she was moving the sloth into Lily's arms. She started talking to Lily about how sloths were great swimmers. After a few minutes, Belinda finally noticed him and handed Peanut to Mrs. Pack. Would you mind watching the little guys while I'm gone? Mrs. Pack laughed. Mind? I'd be delighted. She took Peanut into her arms. Belinda walked outside the habitat to meet Bob, and the two of them walked down the hall. Nancy stepped away from the group, but she still couldn't hear what they were saying. He looks really worried, Bess whispered. What do you think it's about? Nancy watched them from the edge of the sloth habitat. Bob kept bringing his hands together. The rest of the class was chatting about sloths in Costa Rica, but after a few minutes, they seemed to realize something was wrong too. A few of the kids stepped out of the habitat to see where Belinda went. What's wrong? Mrs. Pack asked when Belinda finally came back. Belinda was rubbing her forehead with her fingers like she had a bad headache. Peanut, the baby sloth, was still curled around Mrs. Pack's hand. It's Rainbow, Belinda said, her voice uneven. She's missing. Uh-oh. And the mystery. Chapter 3. An Unlikely Suspect. Belinda put Peanut back and ushered the class out of the sloth exhibit. Okay, guys, quit detour, she said. We're going back to Rainbow's enclosure to see if we can find where she's hiding. Belinda smiled and put them all at ease. Rainbow wasn't lost. They just had to find her. Everyone lined up single file and followed Belinda and Rob back to the tortoise exhibit in the reptile hall. Tortoises are so slow, Nancy thought, so there's no way Rainbow could have escaped. Okay, guys, everyone line up around the enclosure just like last time, Belinda told them. Look around and see if you can find her again. She was right there, Bob said, once they had all found a place around the fence. He pointed to a spot on the ground. She was eating a carrot when I last saw her. That could have been more than 20 or 30 minutes ago. Bob was a lot less calm than Belinda. Well, she must be around here somewhere, Belinda said. I'll go into the enclosure to look behind some of the rocks and things. After all, she couldn't have gotten far. Maybe she escaped, one of Nancy's classmates smirked. He seemed to like the idea of an escape artist turtle. Could she have climbed over the fence, though? Mrs. Pack was studying the 2-foot-wide wooden beams that surrounded the habitat. It seems unlikely. No, I don't think she would. Belinda walked into the habitat and checked under a short shrub in the front corner. This was one of her favorite hiding place spots. I'm so sorry, Belinda. Bob shook his head. I really am. I was in charge of the reptile hall today, and I can't believe this happened on my watch. It's okay, Bob. She could still be in here somewhere, Bess assured him. We just have to keep looking. Nancy could tell he was taking this pretty personally. His eyes looked watery, like he was fighting back tears. Then Nancy heard the sounds of sneakers squeaking on tiles coming from down the hallway and looked up to see a woman running towards them. The woman had a baby strapped to her chest, and she kept stopping to look under benches and in different enclosures. Abby! Abby, where are you? This isn't funny anymore, she called out. If you come out, I'll give you a candy bar. She stopped outside of Rainbow's enclosure. I've been looking all over for you, she said. She was waving to the little girl who was coming out from behind a huge rock in the back corner. You're not supposed to be wandering around by yourself. And what are you doing in here, of all places? Here's a picture of Abby and her mom. The young mother stomped into the habitat and grabbed Abby by the hand. She didn't seem to notice Belinda until she was on her way out. so sorry, the mom said. She has a habit of getting into trouble. I just wanted to see the turtle, Abby whined. Nancy glanced sideways at Bess and George. Sorry. She just wanted to see the turtle. Abby was talking about Rainbow. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, where was I? I'm sorry, I lost my place. 1 second. Learning from home isn't very easy, is it? Oh, here we go. Nancy glanced sideways at Bess and George. She just wanted to see the turtle. Abby was talking about Rainbow. She had run away from her mother right around the time the tortoise went missing. Was this little girl their first real suspect? Did you end up seeing the turtle? Nancy asked. The one that was right here where you were hiding?
Almost will be answered.
Abby suddenly seemed nervous. She grabbed her mother's hand and slipped behind her legs. We're only asking because our tortoise Rainbow just went missing, Belinda explained to the young mother. The woman was tall with dark bangs that kept falling in her eyes. If your daughter saw anything, or maybe she let her out of the enclosure, or hid her somewhere. Are you saying that my daughter, my Abby, stole your turtle? The women looked at Mrs. Pack's class like she wanted them to take her side. You've got to be kidding me. She's 6 years old. But she was here when Rainbow disappeared, wasn't she? Rainbow's not very big. Anyone could pick her up, Bob chimed in. He narrowed his eyes at the little girl. If you took the tortoise, you have to tell us right away. This is very serious. We'll have to call security. The little girl stared up at them, her brown eyes wide. Then her chin started to tremble. She let out the loudest, most sorrowful cry and buried her sobbing face into her mother's side. We're in the last chapter of the day, Chapter 4, Double Takes. Belinda tried to comfort the crying child, but it wasn't much use. Her sobs echoed through the corridor. Nancy and her friends made their way to Mrs. Pack, who was standing awkwardly with the rest of the class, unsure what to do. Mrs. Pack, I know we could help if they let us, Nancy said as she stepped aside with her teacher. Abby's just scared because of the way Bob spoke to her, but she was there at the same time Rainbow went missing. She could have seen something. Mrs. Pack seemed to like the idea. You three are pretty great at solving mysteries. I still can't believe you found my missing ruby ring in September. That was incredible. Nancy just shrugged like it was no big deal. The ring had fallen into the heating grate under Mrs. Pack's desk. They investigated the possibility someone had taken it, but it wasn't long before they realized that wasn't the case. Excuse me, Belinda, Mrs. Pack said, taking Nancy, Bess, and George to the front of the group. I want you to meet Nancy Drew, Bess Marvin, and George Fane. These three girls have solved half the mysteries in River Heights. They've got quite a talent for it. Abby stopped crying when Nancy and her friends came over. She seemed just as interested in what Mrs. Pack was saying as Belinda was. Belinda furrowed her brows, a little confused. I know we're young, but we've got a lot of experience with this kind of thing. Stolen purses, unexplained pranks, missing dogs, you name it, Nancy jumped in. She was used to people underestimating them at first, but she never let that stop her. Well, Belinda tilted her head to the side, considering if you think. But they're just kids, Bob said. No offense, girls, but this is really serious. Rainbow could be in real danger. We know, George said. Keno, stop. I'll have to introduce you to him later. Such a noisy one. We know, George said. Nancy could tell she was annoyed. We'd love to talk to Abby and her mom for a minute, just to see if they noticed anything strange. It's worth a shot, Belinda shrugged. Why don't you do a little investigating while I finish the tour with your class? If you find anything out, I promise you can come back to River Heights Wildlife Center any time you like. And I'll show you anything that you might have missed, even if you don't find out anything. The offer still stands. I'm going to do some of my own investigating, too, Bob jumped in. He crossed his arms over his chest and frowned. Nancy had changed her mind about him. He didn't look like someone's grandpa. He looked like someone's mean grandpa. Belinda glanced at her watch. You can have till the end of the day, and then I think I need to call the police and report her stolen. I hope you can find our girl, she said. And for the rest of Mrs. Pack's class, let's head back towards the sloth exhibit. Belinda gave Nancy a half smile on her way out. Mrs. Pack mouthed the words, "Good luck." Soon, Nancy and the Clue crew were standing alone with Abby and her mom. I'm Nancy, Nancy said, sticking out her hand, and this is Bess and George. I'm Candace, Abby's mom said. She seemed to calm down now that Abby had stopped crying. Do you mind if we sit down at one of those picnic tables in the courtyard? I can only do this for so long. She pointed to the baby who was strapped to her chest. The baby had somehow slept through the entire scene, a big cotton hat covering its eyes. No problem, Nancy said, leading them outside to a table far away from the rest of the class. As soon as they sat down, another woman with a stroller came over. Candace, what's going on? What happened? The woman asked. Her long blonde hair was tied up in a bun, and she kept looking from Nancy to Candace, and from Candace to Nancy. Oh, come down, Beth, please. Come sit down, Beth, please. These girls just want to ask Abby some questions about a turtle that went missing. Long story. Candace kept shaking her head as Beth sat down beside her. Did you see the tortoise when you were wandering around looking at animals? Nancy asked, looking at Abby. The girl just shook her head. Are you sure? This is a little ridiculous, Candace snapped. Abby didn't have anything to do with this. She may wander off sometimes, but she doesn't steal things. Candace's friend Beth nodded in agreement. Or animals, she added. I didn't see the turtle, Abby finally said. Her cheeks were pink. Nancy could tell she was hiding something. But what? She thought it would be better now if Bob wasn't there to scare her. But Abby still seemed nervous. We just had to ask her to be sure, Bess chimed in. What's that in your pocket? George said, pointing to the weird outline in the front of Abby's shorts. Nancy had noticed it, but she hadn't thought to ask. Abby's chin started to tremble again. What is it? Candace asked, reaching for it, and pulled it out. It took Nancy a moment to realize it was a piece of chocolate wrapped in colorful paper. Is this from the gift shop? Did you take this from the gift shop? Candace asked, and Abby started crying all over again. She stuck her face in her mom's side. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, Mommy. Candace sighed. So she took candy from the gift shop. We'll give it back. Now, does that clear things up? She was looking at Nancy, George, and Bess, like this was all somehow their fault. I just don't get why you're talking to us. And that weird boy was walking around all alone. He was definitely up to something. Why don't you go find him? Nancy glanced sideways at her friends. A boy? What boy? Oh, I saw that kid too, Beth added. He passed our group at least 2 times. He was just walking around by himself. Kind of suspicious. Had on a striped shirt. Wait, Candace shook her head. I thought he was wearing a white t-shirt. Maybe it was gray. Didn't he have on white high-top sneakers? You're talking about the kid. He had a button nose and freckles? Beth asked. Yeah, that's him, Candace agreed. He was definitely wearing a white t-shirt. He had big blue eyes. Yes, big blue eyes and a striped shirt. Beth shot her friend a look, as if to say, You've got this all wrong. Nancy pulled out her clue book from her knapsack and started writing down everything the woman had said. It was unusual for witnesses to disagree on what a suspect looked like. She wrote that the boy had blue eyes and a button nose. Freckles, she added, remembering what else they agreed on. What color hair did he have? Bess asked. I think light, Beth said. Yeah, light, Candace agreed. Can you remember anything else about him? George asked. How old was he? A teenager? Just then, the baby who was strapped to Candace's chest woke up. It squirmed a little in its carrier, then let out a loud wail. Here's a picture of Nancy in her clue book. See it? Yep, you can. She's really thinking about something, isn't she? Candace stood and started bouncing it up and down, but it just cried louder. Everyone in the courtyard turned to look. We have to go, she said, grabbing Abby's hand. Beth followed her out, saying something about having diapers in her car. Good luck, she called over her shoulder. Then they were gone. Nancy and her friends took off across the courtyard and found a quiet bench where they could talk. They were definitely describing the same boy, Nancy said, looking at her notes in the clue book. I wish we could have found out a bit more. Though, boy could have 5 or 15 to them. Could be. No, that didn't make sense. A boy could be 5 or 15 to them. And they couldn't even agree on what he was wearing. I must have seen half a dozen boys wearing stripes today, and even more wearing white t-shirts. Is it possible he changed clothes at some point, Bess asked. If he's the one who took Rainbow, it's possible, George said. Nancy sighed, feeling more stumped than she had in a while. She could definitely see a teenage boy wanting a tortoise as a pet, but even when descriptions of suspects were different, they usually weren't this different. Something strange was going on. If he did change clothes to hide his identity, she finally said, we're dealing with one of our sneakiest suspects yet. And that's recapped chapters 1 through 4, which hopefully you've all read, and moms and dads and aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters or whoever else is with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will post chapters 5 and 6 next with questions that will be answered when I post the next questions. So this is the noisemaker. Keno, say hi. This is Keno. Say hi, Keno. He's the one making all the noise. I have to go help him find his ball. Although that's an easy mystery, isn't it? It's right underneath the couch. He's too big to go underneath the couch. But anyways, I hope everyone's doing well, enjoying family time, and staying healthy and happy. And I will read with you soon. Have a good day.